A very good evening to one and all. To a very good evening to one and all present here. I, Pranav Dattawardkar, third minor MBBS, on the behalf of GGMC Case Club, welcomes you all to this second case presentation on hernia in the Clinicon series. Today we have with us Dr. Akshat Mishra, a JR3 in MS Surgery at our very own JJ Hospital. We are so glad to have you on board, sir, and we all are really excited for this session. Today's presenter is Vaidehi Dhake ma'am from third major MBBS. The topic for today's case is hernia.
Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think my friend is sharing the PowerPoint. Yeah, there it is. Good evening, sir. I'm Vaidehi. I'm going to present to you the hernia case I took a couple of days before.
Sure. Go ahead.
So, my patient is a 25-year-old male. Name Puneet Sharma. He's a resident of Balandor, Mumbai. He's Hindu by religion and a salesman by occupation. He presented to the JJH OPD with the chief complaints of swelling on the right side of groin since 1.5 years and pain in right groin since
yeah. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. Carry on. Just finish the history. We'll come to questions after the history.
Okay, sir. History of presenting illness. Patient was apparently all right 18 months back when he noticed a swelling of about 2 finger beds on the right side of groin. The swelling was insidious in onset, gradual in progression, and has now reached his scrotum. And it was associated with aching type of pain since 6 months that increases on prolonged standing and after meals. And it is relieved on micturition and defecation. The swelling aggravated on coughing after meals and on straining the abdomen. It was relieved on lying down. The patient can himself reduce the swelling completely. Moving on to the negative history. There is no history of constipation, fever, redness over the swelling, vomiting, any previous surgeries, acute severe pain, truss application, chronic cough, or micturition abnormalities like increase in frequency or hesitancy. Moving on to his past history, he told that he has a history of trauma to the groin. When he was 6 years of age, he said that it was quite severe trauma, and according to him, that it only led to this hernia, the swelling that he had. There is no history of any surgery in the past. No history of TB contact, COPD, asthma, COVID, or diabetes mellitus. And there is no history of similar complaints in the past too. Personal history, his sleep, bowel, and bladder habits are unaltered. Appetite is unaltered. He's a smoker, but he said that just 1 or 2 cigarettes per day. And he has been smoking for like 6 to 7 years now. And there is no history of alcohol or tobacco consumption.
Okay.
And also there is no family history of such kind of presentation before.
Okay, so how do you guys want to do this? You want to discuss the history first, the questions on the history, and then proceed to examination, or the whole thing is together?
Anything would be all right. Whatever okay, you see.
We'll do the history first. Can you go back to the first slide?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so my question to you is, if in this case, what important professions should we know, should be asked in case of a patient presenting with a swelling in the groin, most likely, which is likely to be a hernia?
So he's having a swelling in the groin. So mostly we have to, if we are looking, or if it is suggestive of hernia, we are thinking about hernia, then we should ask him about if he has some occupation which makes him carry heavy weights, or
okay,
if
good.
strain on his abdomen or stuff like that. Like laborers are many a times laborers mostly are very prone to such conditions. Also,
Okay.
another condition like when we are talking about hernia, it aggravates when it increases when the intra-abdominal pressure increases. So it is also
Yes.
possible in severe respiratory conditions. So we can also ask him about his occupation if it is in any suffocating place, like if he's working in a factory which produces a lot of smoke, or in a chemicals
Fumes.
factory
All right. Fine. Fair
where
enough.
yeah.
Is age important in this patient?
Yes, sir. Because it is it is it is more often in the younger patients to see indirect inguinal hernia, and the
Yes.
direct type of hernia is more common in elderly, because in that kind there is a laxity of the tissue, connective tissue, so which leads to bulging. Here, there is another reason, most probably persistent processes vaginalis. So it
Again.
presents younger.
Okay, that is one of the etiologies as to why a hernia happens. But you're right. In younger patients, we are mostly going to be seeing indirect inguinal hernias, while in older patients are more prone for direct inguinal hernias. So if you have this in a case of a 25-year-old who's come in, so your likelier diagnosis would be an indirect inguinal hernia. All right. Which is more common, an indirect inguinal hernia or a direct inguinal hernia?
Indirect is more common.
Yes. And again, the sex of the patient also matters because, firstly, inguinal hernias in females are usually not seen, and they're
Yes.
extremely rare. And even though in that condition, indirect inguinal hernias are the more common hernias in females. Of all the groin swellings, though, male and female combined, indirect inguinal hernia happens more in males and happens far more in females
Yes.
as well. On the other hand, something like a femoral hernia is more commonly seen in females. Okay. This
Yes, sir.
is so there is a specific anatomical factor in cases in females having hernias, which is the canal of Nuck. So if the canal of Nuck
Yes,
stays
sir.
patent, they will it's more likely for them to have a hernia. So in cases of so in very rare scenarios, because I have never seen a case of a female hernia, inguinal hernia. So in very rare scenarios, you can see these topics can be asked. But yeah, so the history is completely fine here. The chief complaints are very well mentioned, and though I would say that pains in 6 months. Okay, fine. Can we go to the next slide? It's elaborated more on that side. Yeah. So, all right. Yeah. So my question is basically, how do you know that, like on history, that this is a hernia and not a lymph node? Say a lymph node, for example.
So mainly because of his aggravation of swelling on coughing and straining. It
Yes,
is
that's correct.
very diagnostic of hernia. And
Yes.
secondly, sir, he did not complain of any kind of infection per se. And
Yes.
like if we are thinking about lymph node enlargement, there could have been fever which accompanied it, some kind of other history in
Okay.
his genitalia where he could have felt pain or something.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yes, an infective lymph node will be preceded by fever and all other symptoms of an infection, while a
Yes.
hernia will not be.
Fever.
And more importantly, here that hernia reduces. So
Yes, sir.
yeah, you've mentioned that so the hernia reduces on can lying down. So you have to mention whether the hernia is reduced by the patient and or is the hernia reduces on its own. One of those fact, one of those things would be important in history, because we can get a general idea of about the size of hernia without even looking at it. A hernia which is large and reduces on its own will need manual reduction or taxis. And on the other hand, a hernia which is
Yes,
smaller will reduce on its own. So a rough idea you can mention in that. Can we go to the next slide then?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So briefly, just go step by step, starting from your negative history number 1, and just explain why have you taken this particular history. So just for the rest of
Yes,
the
sir.
rest of everyone.
Yes, sir. I asked about constipation for like 2 causes. First, constipation could be a etiological cause too, because it leads to straining of the abdomen.
Absolutely.
And secondly, if the hernia is complicated and has led to intestinal obstruction of some kind, or it is obstructed itself, so it could also lead to constipation.
Excellent. So it's both a cause
I
and
asked
an
about
effect of the hernia. So just remember,
Yes, sir.
all of constipation or constipation is both a cause for hernia. It can be an effect of hernia as well. All right, carry on,
Yes,
carry
sir.
on.
Then I asked about, yes, sir, about fever. Again, for the sake of complication, because if the hernia, like it was looking strangular, I had not seen it before, but if it was strangulated or it got infected because any of the actual viscera came out, so that could have led to fever. So again, for the sake of complication, fever. Redness over the swelling would also have suggested strangulation of the hernia, and same
Yes.
goes for vomiting.
Yes.
These all ruled out that it is not a strangulated hernia. Acute severe
Yeah.
pain also, if it got strangulated, then the pain would have been really severe, and he couldn't have waited for so long before coming to the OPD. So
All right. Good.
and previous surgeries, because many of the open surgeries lead to incisional hernias, and
Yes.
I
It could
wanted
be
to,
a recurrence. It could be also be a
yeah,
recurrence, right? So
yes, sir.
so because if
And
it is
also,
a recurrent hernia, the management for a recurrent hernia changes completely. So I'll let you know once we proceed towards investigation with management. We'll discuss that there. All right.
yes. And also, sir, about the surgeries, if also there is this specific surgery of appendicectomy, which can injure the ilioinguinal nerve and thereby predispose to hernia. So for that cause
Causes
also, I asked.
muscle weakness in that region. Yes.
Yes, sir. Then there was truss application. Many people, as he could reduce the hernia himself, it was possible that he tried to conservatively manage it when he was working or something, and used truss for the same. And
All right.
it is not good for our surgery outcomes in terms of bleeding, surgical bleeding, and also complications of hernias. So uh, we had to know if or not, whether or not he used truss.
All right.
Then chronic cough, um, etiological purpose, or if to know that also cough and everything can present in chronic bronchitis, which can also suggest that he has smoking pathology, and which also leads to collagen disorder, collagen problems in the body. So
Okay.
multiple reasons for chronic cough. Answer micturition, because like there is, like this is, he is a younger patient, so it is not much relevant, but if it is BPH, for elderly patients mostly, so they can have BPH and other urinary problems, which predisposes to hernia. So for that I asked
Yes.
about
Because,
frequency and
but yeah, he is 25 years old, so the chances of him having BPH are
so,
very, very low.
is very low. Also, sir, there is a stricture urethra which can occur in younger patients, But I
But then
I
he would
I
have
just read
come with a
about it.
urinary. He would have come up with a urinary complaint
Problem.
first. Then, yeah, that's okay. It's okay. In
I
a
didn't
normal hernia case,
understand how.
in a normal hernia, I beg your pardon. Please.
I was saying I didn't understand why a stricture urethra could cause a hernia. I mean,
So
how
a
does
strict
it predispose?
so basically a strictured urethra or any stricture down the lower urinary tract that is beyond the bladder. So what it does is that the patient has to strain to eliminate the amount of urine, and there will be post-vital residual urine.
Yeah.
So he will have a feeling of incomplete evacuation of the bladder, which will continuously, for which he'll have to keep going to the washroom more times, keep straining. So it forms a cycle where he has to strain. And as we know that one of the causative factors for hernia is an increased intra-abdominal pressure and straining. So because of which there can be hernia. Also, this had been an older patient with BPH, the BPH gets repaired first before the hernia. So you have to correct, because otherwise what will happen is that you will repair the hernia and patient will have BPH and he will continue straining and he will have a recurrence of the hernia. So there will be, if that happens.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I think we can move on. That's okay. The rest of it is all right.
Okay, sir.
So this is basically the more important. Yeah. Can we go to the next slide, please?
So next is past history.
Can we go to the? Yeah. Thank you.
The next is past history. He complained about trauma to the groin when he was a child. I don't know what relevance it is to the case, but
it can
he
be
put
relevant.
a lot of stress on it. So
so if the patient feels that it might be a causative factor, so it can be relevant. Trauma to the groin can be can cause weakening, very rarely though, but it's okay. It's fine. I have no complaints with the history.
Again, other mostly TB, COPD, asthma, all of these things, COVID, etc., they would lead to cough and thereby straining of the abdomen. Also, diabetes and hypertension we have to ask, because it will affect how we are going to prepare our patient for the surgery. And he doesn't have any similar complaints in the past, so I don't think that it to rule out a recurrence of hernia.
All right,
so
carry on. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
This is fine. This is all fine. No complaints. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So now you can start with the examination.
Okay, sir. The patient was examined with due consent. He is well nourished. He is oriented to time, place, and person, and he is comfortably lying in his bed. He is conscious and coherent too. His temperature was 97.5 degrees. His BP Fahrenheit. BP was 126 by 90 millimeters of mercury as measured in right arm in sitting position. His respiratory rate was 18 cycles per minute, abdominothoracic in nature. His pulse was 70 beats per minute, regular in rhythm, adequate volume, and without any radial or radiofemoral delay. And there were no signs of pallor, icterus, clubbing, cyanosis, any lymphadenopathy or edema whatsoever.
Yeah. So what will be significant lymphedema significant lymphadenopathy in the groin? Like if you have to say if a patient has inguinal lymph nodes positive or inguinal lymphadenopathy positive, how will you say, like up till what level will you say what should be the size of the lymph node if it has to be inguinal lymphadenopathy?
Sorry, sir. I don't know. I just got.
That's
They
okay.
are not.
It's 1.5 centimeters. Just remember,
Okay.
when we say that a patient has lymphadenopathy, there are criteria for it. So any lymph node more than 1.5 centimeters in the groin, any lymph node more than 1 centimeter in the neck, and any lymph node palpable in the axilla is considered as lymphadenopathy. So just remember it. Some examiners ask. So yeah, carry on.
Yes, sir.
Next slide, please.
Okay. Yes, sir. Moving on to local examination. So in the local examination, patient was examined with due consent under adequate illumination, and he was exposed from his umbilicus to the foot, and he was examined in standing as well as supine position both. Starting with the inspection, local inspection. He has hernia on the right side. So first I took a look on the left side. It appears to be normal. So I can compare the right side now, which has the swelling. The swelling is seen on the right side of the groin. The size of the swelling is 7 into 3 centimeters. It is single and pyriform in shape. The surface is smooth and it extends from just above the inguinal ligament up to the scrotum. Skin over the swelling is.
Can we go to the slide, please, where it's all written? The slide. Yeah, you carry on. I'm sorry,
Yes,
sorry to interrupt.
No, sir. Skin over the swelling is appearing to be normal, and the margins are well defined. Impulse on coughing is present. The swelling is expansile in nature and on coughing, and it is not associated with any peristalsis over the swelling or so. On inspection of the penis, it was seen to be deviated to the opposite side, and malleolus bulges were not observed on standing. And yes, so the left side appears normal. The right side has the swelling and its inspectory findings.
Okay.
So should I move on to palpation?
Yeah. Finish the whole
Okay,
case and then we'll discuss again.
Okay, sir. Palpation. The inspectory findings are confirmed on palpation. There is no local rise in temperature, and he is slightly tender. The size is now confirmed to be 8 into 3.5 centimeters. It is extending from above the inguinal ligament and it descends into the scrotum. We cannot get above the swelling, and the consistency of the swelling is felt to be elastic. The swelling is completely reducible, and I did not have to perform taxes. He could do it himself. Moving on to the tests. On deep ring occlusion test, the swelling was not visible on coughing. On Siemens 3-finger test, the impulse was felt on the tip of the finger, and sorry, sir. On Siemens 3-finger test, the impulse was felt on the index finger, and on superficial ring invagination test, the impulse was felt on the tip of the finger. Then on palpation and examination of the genitalia, it appeared to be normal. Then abdominal examination, the muscular tone is good, and no bulges are seen on palpation also. There is no divarication of recti, and the traction test was also negative. Now, this was palpation. Next is percussion. Percussion, I just percussed over the swelling. I did not completely understand, but
it's okay. Percussion isn't
yeah,
important in hernia as well, so that's all right.
Okay,
Percussion auscultations, you will most likely not hear anything, so it's okay. But all right, I think, can you summarize the case for me now?
Yes, sir. Patient is a 25-year-old male and is a case of right-sided, indirect, complete, and uncomplicated inguinal hernia with content being the bowel with probable etiology of trauma and with good abdominal muscle tone.
Can we go back to inspection now? Inspection.
Yes,
Next
sir.
slide, please. So you said it extends from of the inguinal ligament to the, so the swelling is scrotal, inguinal scrotal in nature. As in, can you palpate the swelling going into the scrotum? That is what you mean.
Yes, sir.
All right, fine. So it is piriform in shape, 7/3. All right. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, fine. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yeah. So, all right. So how do you know that this swelling that you've seen right now is a hernia and not a hydrocele or not a varicocele? Those are the two most common other swellings in the groin. So
Yes,
how do you
sir.
know it's not a hydrocele and not a varicocele on just on inspection?
Yes, sir. On okay, just on inspection. First of all, sir, I don't know, sir. On inspection,
It's you can, so right now you
maybe
said,
the
right?
shape. The shape
Yeah.
was very,
So if it's a large hernia
very
and like you said,
classical.
yeah, it's like what it seems like it's a classical hernia. So the hernia is
Yes,
inguinoscrotal
sir.
in nature. So there will be an inguinal component.
Yes,
So
sir.
the swelling will arise from above the scrotum up down to the root of
Yes, sir.
penis and then into the scrotum. While a hydrocele would most likely be completely
Huh.
inside the scrotum. It's a scrotal swelling only. On the other hand, a varicocele is usually not best seen, so it's more felt, and you're supposed to feel the bag of worms, as they say, on
Bag of
palpation.
Prometheus.
Yeah, and the
Palpation.
only time that varicoceles might be clinically visible is when a patient performs a Valsalva maneuver, or in this case, when he cuffs. So if he
Yeah.
cuffs and you see dilated cordy veins over the swelling or
Huh.
in that region, it's more likely a varicocele. But so you're from inspection, the swelling is inguinal in nature, and then going into the scrotum, that it has an expansile cuff impulse, which is positive, and which means that it is more likely to be a hernia.
Yes,
All
sir.
right.
And so, like
Same.
my case,
Yeah, sure.
so my case was like the person I saw, he really had a proper piriform swelling, and I could demarcate and stuff. But people present with really large swellings. So if that is the case, so like if I cannot demarcate if or not it is starting from above the inguinal ligament. So
Okay.
in that case, can I on inspection demarcate if or not it is hydrocele and hernia? Or then
See,
there is no.
a hydrocele will be entirely limited to the scrotum. It is not going to go out of the scrotum. And a large hernia, whether it is direct or indirect. So mostly the hernias which are so hernias can be inguinal in nature, inguinoscrotal in nature. If the hernia is limited to the inguinal, it will, so your scrotum is going to be normal and everything is going to be at the level of the groin. That is called what you most commonly call as a bubonocele. So it is limited to the
Yes, sir.
groin. So in a bubonocele, which means that you'll have an expansile cuff impulse only at the groin. And these are usually direct hernias. Similarly, in indirect hernias, which usually go up till the scrotum, they will always have an inguinal component and a scrotal component. So when you do a cuff impulse, you can see that the swelling is traveling from deep inguinal ring into the superficial inguinal ring and expanding into the scrotum. That is what you will see. It is clinically seen in all cases of hernia, in all large hernias as well. So, all right.
Okay.
Then same three differentials on palpation. How will you differentiate them on palpation now? Same three.
Yes, sir.
differentials? Hernia, hydrocele, and
Uh,
varicocele.
so first of all, getting above the swelling is not possible in a hernia because there is not just the spermatic cord, but other contents of the hernia also present within within the canal. So it is not possible for us to get above the swelling with the thumb and the index finger, which
Yes.
is not the case in hydrocele. Hydrocele, the whole thing is confined to the scrotum. So we can get to the root of the scrotum where we can just palpate the spermatic cord. So that way, that is one way where I
Yes.
can, yes. And also the transilluminancy which we can test for is possible to like if it is a hydrocele and not a pyocele. So we
Only
can
in
perform
only in primary hydroceles. Usually
only in
secondary hydroceles,
vaginal hair.
secondary
हाँ,
yeah, the tunica vaginalis hydroceles होते हैं, जो primary hydroceles होते हैं, are usually transilluminant. Secondaries may not be transilluminant because they are due to a pathological process. So there might be other components in the
okay.
hydrocele fluid. But yeah, again, secondary hydroceles are rare, quite rare compared to primary hydroceles.
And varicocele, we can palpate the bag of worms appearance, and as you said, and also on the cuffing part, and if we can on cuffing, if we can see the cordy structures, I that
Yes.
only, and for
Got it.
palpation. Yeah.
Okay, fine. So you have a clinical diagnosis of a complete right-sided indirect inguinal hernia with okay, yeah, sorry, those three tests which I think we've missed out on those three tests. Yeah. So how, just explain
Yes,
the
sir.
mechanism behind each of these.
Yes, sir. First was the deep ring occlusion test. So here what we do is firstly, it's very important to perform this test that the patient, the swelling should be reducible because once all the contents are in, only after that we can demarcate from where it is actually starting and coming out. So he was asked to reduce his swelling, and for the deep ring occlusion test, the deep ring is the which is present in the transversalis fascia and is located little above the mid inguinal point,
Yes.
about 1.5
centimeters above.
centimeters maybe, and 1.25, and we have to use our thumb to occlude that place, and then we have to ask the patient to like look at his other side because we don't want his um, secretions on us. So we would cough, and on coughing, if we have now occluded the deep ring, and if still he can on coughing we can see the bulging, so it means that the contents are not coming out of the deep ring, but they are actually bulging through the weakness in the abdominal wall. So it is more
Through the
probably a
floor.
direct hernia.
Yes, through the floor
Yes,
of
sir,
the
the floor.
inguinal. Okay. Yeah.
The-
So where does the inguinal hernia, direct inguinal hernia come from? What is the Hasselbalch triangle?
Yes, sir. The Hasselbalch triangle is medially, it is the lateral border of rectus abdominis. Inferiorly, it is the inguinal ligament, and laterally, it is the inferior epigastric vessel. So this forms the Hasselbalch's triangle, and so when it comes, whenever a hernia, this vessel is the demarcation. If the hernia is coming from medial to this vessel and lies in the Hasselbalch's triangle, it is direct, and lateral to is it's indirect. That is, it is coming from the deep ring.
Yes. And so in what cases will a deep ring occlusion test be negative, but the patient actually has an indirect inguinal hernia? So patient can have an indirect inguinal hernia and the deep ring occlusion test may be negative as well. As in, you may see bulging as well.
Yes,
That
so
is also
sometimes
possible.
Yes, sir. I guess if there are adhesions present in the bowel, and so the
No.
contents cannot come out on
No,
that.
that's not true. I'm saying
case.
that the content should come out through the deep ring itself when
Okay.
you are occluding the deep ring. So you've done a deep ring occlusion test, you've put your finger at the deep ring.
Okay.
So you're expecting it is not going to come out, but yet there is bulging, and the patient does not have a direct inguinal hernia. Say in the same patient, there was bulging in this case. Same patient, 25-year-old male, there was bulging. 25-year-old, so it's more likely to be an indirect inguinal hernia, as we've already discussed. So you've put your finger at the deep ring, and then yes, I think people have been answering correctly on the group.
Yeah.
Sakshi and yes, finger is small would be a not the correct answer. So basically,
the deep ring is dilated.
Yes, so it is called a patulous deep ring or a dilated deep ring. In some cases, because the deep ring is like because of the continuous pressure from the intra-abdominal, the continuous intra-abdominal pressure, there is what the deep ring becomes extremely dilated. So the hernia sac can actually just come around your finger, around your occluding thumb, and still present as a bulge. Okay, so then you have the superficial ring and ring imagination test, where so had you been feeling it at the pulp of your finger, it would have been a direct hernia, and if you're feeling it at the tip of your finger, it will be an indirect hernia. That's correct. And on Siemens finger, okay, fine. So in the Siemens test, so you've used your 3 fingers, and if you feel it on the middle finger, it is a direct hernia. If you feel it on the ring finger, it is likely to be a so fine. The rest of it is all right. So what will you do for this case patient? How will you manage it?
So management for this case is going to be surgery, and even if it was direct, it wouldn't have changed our approach. And so what we are doing nowadays is modified Lichtenstein's repair, hernioplasty. So we would have taken the patient for the same after this pre-op preparation, and we would have put on a mesh over the defect. First, we would have pushed all the contents inside, and then we would have put a mesh over the fascia transversalis, that is the floor of the inguinal canal, and that most of the time suffices.
Most of the time, almost always, it has a recurrence rate of less than 0.2%. So it's the gold standard procedure, and it is an anterior repair. So hernia repairs can be divided into anterior repairs and posterior repairs. Posterior repair is when you're approaching the hernia posteriorly, which in most cases is through a laparoscopic approach. You go inside. It's called a total abdominal preperitoneal repair, or a TEP approach, or a total extraperitoneal repair. So basically, you're putting a mesh behind. Yeah, you're putting a mesh just between the peritoneum and the fascia transversalis. So peritoneum, fascia transversalis, internal transversalis, transversus abdominis, internal oblique, external oblique, skin. So if you're approaching it anteriorly, the hernia, it's an anterior approach. If you're approaching it posteriorly, it's a posterior approach. So if you put in a mesh between, in the preperitoneal plane, that is before the peritoneum, so which means either between fascia transversalis and transversus abdominis, or between fascia transversalis and the peritoneum itself, those repairs become your posterior approach repairs. And anything you're doing anteriorly is an anterior approach. So what we do, or what most of the world does, is modified Lichtenstein's tension-free mesh hernioplasty, where you put in a mesh and you reconstruct the floor of the mesh, floor of the inguinal canal. So you you strengthen the floor of the inguinal canal. You for direct hernias which are coming directly through the floor, if you just put in a mesh, it will be enough. For indirect hernias which are coming through the deep ring, you're supposed to tighten the deep ring. So your mesh goes around the deep ring. Right? So you form something called as a neo deep ring. Basically, you have tightened the deep ring. You have sutured. You have taken sutures along the deep ring, close to the deep ring, not to occlude the cord, but just enough to not give it enough space so that something can come out from below. And after all of this, you will obviously consult the patients for. See, when you're managing a hernia, you should always start off with that. I will like to rule out all the causative factors. So maybe if a patient has COPD, asthma, something, you will try to control those factors as well. So you can always say that post-surgery and pre-surgery as well, I would like to medically manage the other conditions. Like I would like him to lose weight, which is one of the most common cause for increased intra-abdominal pressures. I would like him to, so he should undergo these like weight loss with not regimes per se, but he's supposed to lose weight post surgery. He's not supposed to strain. He's not supposed to lift heavy weights. And after all of this, once he's fit and anesthetically, you can induce him and everything else, then you can go for a hernia repair. At your level, please.
Actually, I attended yesterday. So, ma'am, what she did was she also like she reduced. I think it is called double breasting, but she also did that for that person. She kind of put a mesh over it, but it was still bulging. So she double breasted the fascia transversalis, and
so basically, fascia transversalis is a very
why did that happen?
So fascia transversalis is a very loose layer of tissue. So what you do is you're supposed to reconstruct the floor. So initially, when people had started doing hernias, when you did not have prosthesis, so you have the inguinal ligament, which is a hard tendinous structure, not much mobile, right? And fascia transversalis is a very loose layer of tissue. So what they used to do was they used to take the fascia transversalis of one edge and then suture it to the conjoint tendon or the inferior shelf of the inguinal ligament. If you've seen diagrams in your books of the inguinal ligament, it is shaped like a shelf. If you see it from the head end,
portion.
If you see it from the head end of the patient, it looks like a shelf. Can I switch on my video? Might be able to explain it better to you guys. So if you see it from the head end of the patient, it looks like a shelf. It is like this, and the fascia transversalis continues on from here. So you take this fascia transversalis and you take the shelving and you suture it together. But what this did was, this was a very tension. The repair was under a lot of tension. So if the patient had a severe bout of cough, this would break and the hernia would. All right. So in this case, what the people decided was that they will just close in the repair, and then keep a mesh on top of this plane. So once the mesh is there, the mesh causes fibrosis eventually, which causes stiffening of all the fascia transversalis and the reflected part. So this becomes a very strong layer and it does not give way.
Okay.
Right. So the double breasting is just like an additional technique. Double breasting means I have taken 2 layers of fascia transversalis and I've just overlapped them together so that I can get a floor. And then I've put a mesh on top of it. There is some amount of bulging because patient is under anesthesia, but eventually there will be no visible hernia when the patient comes out of surgery.
Okay. Okay, sir.
So double breasting or modified Bassini's repair, as it is called, is one of those techniques of strengthening the floor. So you strengthen the floor of the inguinal canal and you put in a mesh in that plane so that you will not have any recurrence. In case you have a recurrence, say this was a recurrent hernia and the patient was was previously operated with Lichtenstein, then you cannot do a because you've already put in a mesh and you've already violated that plane. So you will have so much fibrosis that you will not be able to approach the patient, approach the case. So in this case, you do a posterior repair. So in recurrent hernias, laparoscopic surgeries are much better because you have to change the approach because one plane is destroyed. तुमने वहाँ पे mesh लगा दिया है. You've done a lot of dissection there. So basically, there is no room to work with. So you do a posterior repair. All right. Any other questions? I think
also,
there was,
sir, I read.
Yeah. Please carry on. Ask me what
So
you
also, I read in tip. We have these two laparoscopic procedures, or anterior and the posterior approach. So it was written that the anterior approach is much more better than the posterior, like because we are breaching the perineum. But is there
That's
like
also
is it that only if we break the perineum? Is it because infection chances would increase if we are in?
No, see, infection risks are very high.
I was
Firstly,
saying that,
since if you're putting in a prosthesis, hernia is a clean surgery. There are 4 grades of surgery. If you guys have read, there's a clean surgery, clean contaminated surgery, and a dirty surgery. So in hernia, you're as long as the bowel is not strangulated or incarcerated or obstructed, there is no risk for any damage to the, because you're staying in a plane which is well away from the abdominal contents. But rarely on certain occasions, you may have a contaminated bowel, in which case you cannot put in a mesh. Firstly, so always remember that. Never put in a prosthesis in cases of contamination, because if the prosthesis gets infected, it will be hell for the patient. So firstly that. And in a posterior approach, there is no such risk of contamination. It is just that the posterior approach is technically more difficult and demanding, and the patient, and there is not enough substantial data to prove any differences between posterior and anterior. Anterior approach has been done for the past hundreds of years, 100 years at least, and the posterior approach is just a very recent approach. So as of now, saying that the anterior approach is better is technically correct in terms of textbook, but that is also because the results are not completely in for posterior approach. But like, it's not adapted as much as the anterior approach is adapted.
Okay.
I think I saw a question before when someone said something about hypospadiasis and hernia. If someone is operated for hypospadiasis, can it cause hernia in the future? So a hypospadiasis patient that is operated for hypospadiasis depends on a lot of things actually. Hypospadiasis is not an easy repair. You have to change the curvature of the patient's body and everything. So basically, it has nothing to do, as long as you're not violating the patient's abdominal wall. Any surgery done elsewhere has no relation to hernia. So as long as तुमने patient का abdominal wall नहीं destroy किया है, मतलब incision नहीं लिया है, तो you will have no problems with the hernia. Any other questions? Does anyone have?
Thank you so much for answering. If any other participant has any query, they can surely reach out to us.
Yeah. I guess that's it.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for guiding us today. I'm sure all the participants enjoyed today's session, and I'm sure that they have a much better insight into hernia, right? In the topic of hernia at this moment.
Yes.
Thank you so much,
I think special thanks to Vedi. She presented very well.
Yes, thank you, ma'am, for presenting today's case.
Thank you.
And a big thank you for today's participants for joining in. a message to our participants. If any participant wants to join in and present a case for our future sessions, they can surely reach out to the GGMC Case Club. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, sir.